Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. Ben Kinsley is here with me this evening. Ben, how are you?
Good, Pat.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Ben is co-host and co-producer. And our special guest tonight is Hannah Bogard. And she's here because she's a camp director of Camp Hochelaga.
Hochelaga.
I wasn't even close. My husband was practicing with me on the way out. Hochelaga. And Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, they are celebrating their 100th anniversary. And when Hannah called and asked, and I said, oh, you've got to come on, 100 years? How do you do it? It's great. I had no idea it was that. I know it was around when I was young, and that's close enough. So it's really only 25 more years. So anyway, could you tell a little bit about yourself first before we get started talking about the YWCA and all that it brings to Vermont?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm new to Vermont. I came out to Vermont from Michigan a couple of years ago. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, and I went to college at Kalamazoo College in Michigan. I spent my undergraduate studies focused on really looking at how time outdoors and summer camp settings impact youth of color and youth in queer communities. So really looking at intersectionality of identity for youth who are often overlooked, and how they exist in the space of summer camp and in wilderness adventure programs.
Cool.
And I worked with a number of camps in the Michigan area that specifically served at-risk youth, and then came out here a couple of years ago to join Camp Hochelaga's team.
That's great. Do that again, Camp
Hochelaga.
Hochelaga.
Lega for short.
Lega.
Oh,
that's right. I remember writing that. Let's just call it Lega. I like that.
Where did the name come from?
Hochelaga. So it's a word. It's an Abenaki word that came from the Rapids area just outside of Montreal.
Okay.
As far as we know and understand.
Cool. I was gonna say that's got to be Abenaki of some sort.
Yeah,
like
right.
that's got to be a.
That's cool.
Yeah. So the true roots of how that word came down into the Champlain Islands are a little bit fuzzy. Where we've been working to dig back and consult with folks that may know far more than we know to really root out where that word and that name came from and how it made it all the way down to.
Wish we had known this when we did our show. We had two people from the nation come here, a chief and a young woman who worked for the state on Indian issues, and we could have asked them. They would know.
They probably would.
They
Probably
would.
Yeah. They might. Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about the YWCA and its history here in Vermont and kind of the story, for the last 100 years and what, you guys have been working on?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks for asking. So YWCA Vermont came to Vermont as the state's YW chapter just a couple of years before Camp Hochelaga was officially founded. So a few years before 1919, there's some debate in our history of exactly when YWCA Vermont itself was founded in relation to when Camp Hochelaga took off. But Camp Hochelaga was YWCA Vermont's very first major project here in the state. As a member of the national organization YWCA USA, YWCA Vermont focuses on empowering women and eliminating racism through all of our programs, and we have since we started here. We do that by connecting with YWCA USA for their national campaigns. So they run an annual campaign known as Stand Against Racism that focuses on taking a stand in your community, raising awareness around racial and social justice issues and the immediate needs of those communities as expressed by those communities for us to address and move on. And then in the fall, Week Without Violence is the YWCA USA national campaign to raise awareness for domestic and sexual violence.
Which is definitely a prominent topic over the last couple of years. I think there's a lot of relevance, unfortunately.
Well, that's what I said when we were putting the questions together. On your website, it says since 1919, YWCA Vermont has been the voice for change in all of the areas you just mentioned: racism, empowering women, peace and justice and freedom. I find it since 1919 we've been dealing with these issues.
And long before, I
and
believe.
long before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's like they could have been written yesterday when
Yeah.
they wrote their mission statement. There it is, just as valid today. That's very sad, I think, a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what is your approach to working with the women? I mean, are there programs and it's intertwined in there, or is it just flat out, this is a program about racism? And how do you teach it? Is it age appropriate? Is it, has it been researched by somebody so you know you're teaching stuff that's supported by data?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and in YWCA Vermont's history, that's seen a lot of change and a lot of flux as far as like our approach through our programs to reach and connect with our community inside of that mission statement. From the very beginning, as we talked about, Camp Hochelaga has been a component, but for a while, it was not the only component. We also had an affordable housing branch of YWCA Vermont in downtown
Wow.
Burlington. It's now a unit that's owned and operated by COTS. So we've since
okay. That
down
makes
on
a lot
North
of sense.
Avenue.
Yeah.
And they're in their old building. COTS moved into the building where
Yep.
YWCA was when I came here.
Yeah.
So there's a piece of YWCA Vermont's history that's centered on reaching women within that mission by providing affordable housing and making shelter and the resources that come with shelter an option when they sometimes might not have been otherwise.
So since that shift happened, what's the focus now for YWCA?
Yeah, so right now, and especially just recently this year and the past couple of years, we've really been shifting our focus to looking at how our robust camp community can connect with that mission statement. So how can we be really intentionally training our summer staff, our counselors, and recruiting our campers from all over Vermont, all over the United States, and all over the world to truly bring together a community of people who can have dialogues in a place that is safe and inclusive about the issues that we're facing today.
I can
I think
see if
really
I'm
critical.
sorry, Ben. I can see if the kids go, the young ladies go. What is the age? What
6
is
to
it?
17.
Right.
Mhm.
If they only go a week, do you feel comfortable or confident that they've sort of learned something, gotten the message, and then do you communicate with them over the year to just kind of keep reinforcing that message? Because these are pretty heavy topics, and I don't know if they're even comfortable enough to talk about them at the young ages that you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. As we move forward, we're balancing this acknowledgement that, just like you said, a week is a very short amount of time
Right.
to take away a lasting impact. While I do think that being in the intensity of an overnight setting means that your week
Right.
results in a little bit more impact than it would be at the daytime level. It seems to have a more powerful and lasting impact when we can have kids for 2 and 4 week sessions.
Yeah, I
So
would
we,
think. Right.
yeah, we hope to move more concretely in the direction of offering those longer sessions that have a bigger impact.
Yeah.
But we also recognize the balance of really pushing to keep camp accessible and to keep it something that we can offer at a cost that is comfortable to as many families as possible.
Right.
Well, I think a lot of the value, even just in a week-long camp setting, right, is you get an intensity there. Like there's conversations. You create space to have conversations that you wouldn't have elsewhere,
Right.
even in a school setting, right? Because even in a school setting, school's trying to create space to have some of these types of conversations, but it's still with peers, right? It's still with people that you see every day and are going to see every day for, however many years. And that can be a block, I think, versus in a camp setting with people you may know sometimes, but also a lot of people you don't know and probably won't see again. Opens up space to have really, I think really meaningful conversations and not have to worry about what the fallout might be with your peer group or whatever, but to actually have conversations and dig into some of those
But
issues.
sometimes there are bonds
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
occur between campers that last a lifetime.
I'm
I
still,
just think it's amazing.
I still communicate with people that I met in
see?
summer camp.
Yeah, there you go.
15, 20 years
Yeah.
ago,
I'm on
whatever.
the same page.
Right.
Some of my, we were talking
Yeah,
about
right.
it before we
Yeah.
started. Some of my lifelong most important mentors and friends
Yeah.
came out of my time at camp. And I think one of the powerful things about the camp space of Hochelaga is something that we've talked about a lot recently as a single-gendered space. So we are an all-girls camp, and we've talked a lot about what that means for our queer youth
Right.
and for our non-binary youth and where they fit in that picture and in that conversation, and recognizing that we want to broaden the way we talk about single-gendered spaces at camp to include
That's a good point.
to include
'Cause,
our
I mean, things have been moving so fast in this type of,
yeah.
that you really have to be right on top of it and know what's the right way to explain to the kids and get them into the conversation. Because they're experiencing it
yeah.
in school,
Right.
right? They're everywhere, actually.
Yeah, and it's really important to create that space where we still hold on to the empowering part of the single-gendered space to give girls and women the floor to really
Right.
to really share their voice and feel strong and empowered, and not feel like they have to take a step back to let the male in the room take the lead. So to give them that opportunity for empowerment and connection
Wow.
without creating a space that is exclusive to our gender non-binary.
It sounds like quite
that's
a
amazing.
challenge to
Yeah.
try
It
to
is,
accommodate
it's interesting.
both.
And there's single-gendered camps all over the nation are in the same conversation
Yeah.
about how we continue forward with this desire to create really, truly, genuinely inclusive, safe
Yeah.
environments.
Well, that's like the
within that
Boy
conversation.
Scouts,
I was going
right?
to say the Boy Scouts
Yeah,
is
they're
another
now the
example.
Scouts.
Right,
Yeah.
and they're
Right.
trying to grapple with this too as a traditionally single gender organization. How do you have the same thing, like where you have an organization that's been built on this male role model type
Right.
of organizational leadership, and now how do you adjust to deal with non-gender conforming or non-binary?
Because you and the Boy Scouts in particular all rely on volunteers. And so when a volunteer comes, do you have to do a background check? How do you get them up to speed to make sure they're supportive of what we're talking about? That's the first thing I would think. And then how do you teach them what to say, what to do, how to handle situations if they come up? That's quite a bit of responsibility for a volunteer. So,
Absolutely. So we do hire in 45 to 50 paid summer staff. So we have a fairly
That's
large
huge.
staff
Pretty large,
team.
yeah. That's
great.
Yeah. We typically have about 150 kids at camp at a given time. So 150 kids, 45 or so staff. That includes our kitchen team.
that's a good
and
ratio, isn't it? That's good.
Yeah. We really believe in the power of, when it's possible to have youth in smaller groups that have more adult involvement. You tend to have a safer and more inclusive
So are they
space.
trained? I mean, what kind of volunteer do you look for? Like, or in this case, they're employees. What kind of background do you look for? A person who's been involved with youth before? Or?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's always exciting to have summer camp staff come to us who have prior youth experience. But really at the core of it is a willingness and an openness to think creatively at the first and foremost piece of their approach and their job to be a positive mentor. So to be able to have a conversation with myself and our assistant director where they can clearly express their passion, interest, and skill in working with young people to feel empowered and strong and included.
What a great thing. I bet these kids just feel so tied up with not being able to talk in school like you were talking about. And here they go to a place where they can, I think that's wonderful. I'm sure they want to come back the next year.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep. And our summer staff go through a pretty extensive training.
Yeah.
We have them for an entire week. At the higher level, we have them for more like 2 weeks, our leadership team, to make sure that we've really had a chance to do some training.
Right.
We train on mandated reporting. Everybody is background checked.
Right.
And we train on trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
We train on talking to kids about race and racism and how
Right.
they can facilitate those conversations productively and in a safe way that doesn't put potentially the child of color in the space in an uncomfortable situation. So we have a good amount of time to talk through all of that as a team and make sure that everybody's really on the same page.
I'm on the board of Prevent Child Abuse Vermont.
Oh, wonderful.
And they are always talking about trauma-informed, and I understood what trauma-informed mean, but I never quite understood the impact of certain words. And they teach you what words you should say and not say that would have an impact on a child negatively. And it's really interesting
And it's
to
not
go
all
through.
the same.
No, it's
No.
not. Oh,
Yeah, it's very
it's really amazing
specific to
what
the
damage you can do.
Yeah.
You know, that's great.
Something you'd said earlier was the fact that you outreach to people all around the country, all around the world. Do we have kids from all over the country, all over the world coming to the camp here in Vermont?
Yeah, so at the camper level and at the staff level,
Okay.
we have campers and staff coming from all corners of the world. This past summer we had campers from China, Japan, Germany, Spain. There's a big community in Quebec that come down from Canada for camp every summer. So the reach globally is pretty large. We had staff from Mexico and Canada as well in the past couple of years, Spain and Brazil. So a really interesting combination of cultures and communities coming together in this little 30-acre
That's
piece of
great.
property on
That's
the
very
lake
cool.
to have
That's
this
awesome.
pretty intense and connected experience together, which is, I think, one of the really unique things about summer camp, especially in a state like Vermont, where many of our Vermont campers are coming from smaller communities,
Right.
and may not have had a whole lot of opportunity to interact with people from very
Also,
different cultures
That's
and places.
very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So just from a visual perspective, when you see the camp, what, there's obviously a large dining hall, and are they all like little camps, little tents? What does the camp look like?
Yeah, so we have a beautiful 30-acre piece of property.
Wow.
We're right on the shore of Lake Champlain, so the bulk of the property is shoreline, which is
Nice.
incredible. It's a phenomenal resource.
Right.
And we have a big, enormous dining hall, or lodge, we call it,
Yeah.
where we meet for all of our meals. Our kitchen staff and our head chefs are on site, so all of our food is, all of our meals are from scratch and
Oh.
served hot. A lot of our camp food comes from local farms, which has
Great.
been a move for us in the last couple of years, because we are in the Champlain Islands, which is a heavily an industry heavily focused on agriculture. To
Right.
be able to pull from those local farms has
Great.
been
Farm
amazing.
to plate.
Yes,
I love it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then our campers do sleep in electricity-free cabins. And our staff actually sleep in little canvas platform tents, which back in the day a number of decades ago, we had everybody in platform tents, including
Oh,
the campers. So
right.
we've, in the 80s and 90s, we moved towards having kids in wooden cabin structures.
So there's no charging cell phones?
None at all.
No cell
That's
phones,
the
no
first
Wi-Fi.
thing I thought about. And
Yep.
my hair dryer, forget this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they live without electricity.
They do. We have electricity, of course, in our lodge and in our
Uh-huh.
bathhouses. We have hot showers and those kinds of amenities. But the day comes to a close when
Yep.
the sun sets,
Yeah,
and
you
there's
go to sleep.
Yep, and there's a beautiful connection to true darkness and the sounds of nature at night, which you often don't hear,
Yep.
especially if you're
Wow,
coming from
it
somewhere
shows.
like
That's
Boston
cool.
or New York.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
There's never a true darkness.
Right,
you
right.
know.
It can be. It's really interesting. We've just started to incorporate this night noises component of the first night of camp to take a minute to really come together as a full camp community and talk about what you might hear at night, recognizing that even if you're 12 or 15 years old, you might not feel totally comfortable in the sounds of nature and the
Especially on
forest.
a lake shore, you might have,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
6 years old, what grade is that? Is that first grade, second?
Typically headed into first grade or headed
first
into
grade,
second
wow.
grade. Those
It's
tend to
pretty
be our
little
youngest.
to be alone for
Yeah.
a week or two. Mom's home crying, I'd be home. My child.
I'll
she's
say
all right.
I love camping. One of the most unique things is being woken up in the middle of the night by two raccoons fighting each other.
Oh,
It's
really?
a
There's
pretty
a memory.
unique
There's a memory.
experience. Yeah.
We hear the coyotes a little bit
Oh, yeah?
in the
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. and
Because
the
you also
foxes.
talk on your website about teaching the women and girls about healthy lifestyle choices. And then you say exploring the intersection of race and gender and nurture environmental. I mean, talk about the environment and how the environmental stewardship. So that's a lot. I'm just flabbergasted, sorry. I think you could go a week on one topic. And I give you a lot of credit for, because I'm sure in between this, there's races and swimming, and there's just downright fun stuff.
Right, right. And the
You know,
majority of camp, the daily programming really looks like what you picture summer camps will look like, right? Kids are off doing archery and playing
Right.
soccer and swimming and sailing and all of
Yeah.
this. And really where that mission comes in is in our staff training and in that interaction that happens between kids and their role models and their mentors throughout every component of the day. So it really comes into play when a social interaction takes place and we have a counselor there, a mentor there to step in and help navigate that interaction to make sure that the outcome is inclusion, understanding,
Right.
explanation,
Learning.
and that everybody grows out of
Right.
Yeah.
that situation, positive and challenging,
Wow, that's impressive.
Very cool.
both ways.
Yeah.
Well, and having that diversity too, I think, is important, and that's where, you know, that can be a challenge in a state like Vermont. We're not that diverse
Right.
as a state,
Right.
and you know, a lot of times kids in school, unless you're in Burlington or Winooski, you're probably not getting exposed to other
Right.
cultures and other people that may not look like you. And I think that's unfortunate that, you know, you may not get those experiences except for at a camp like this, where you get some of that more a more diverse set of people, and not just you know race or whatever. You also get this, you know, the small town big city
Right.
diversity as well, because I think people approach things differently. You know, what's normal in a city may be totally not normal in a small town in Vermont,
Right.
and vice versa. So
I remember the first time we were going to move to Bristol from New York, and we went up to the 4th of July parade, and I was with my husband, and there's thousands of people there, and I'm looking around, and I said, I can't believe it's all me. I mean, everybody there was
Yeah.
me.
Or looked like you.
There was, yeah, looked like me. And it was weird, because I come from New York, and every other person is something else, and I think it adds to the excitement. The food's a lot better back then, because they bring their, you know, their culture and ideas about things and the way they dress and stuff. I never was in that situation where I looked around thousands of people and I'm like, oh, a little boring.
Yeah.
It's all me.
Well, it's interesting because I live in a pretty diverse neighborhood, and you know, so I see people from Indonesia or Bhutan or
Yeah.
you know Thailand. A couple
That's cool.
Armenians in my neighborhood, and you know, I see all this diversity just walking down my street. But then anywhere else I go,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, you know, it's interesting. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting dissection of.
Because you miss a lot if there's not a
Yeah.
there's not a blend of people and cultures and nationalities and way of thinking. That's like at work.
Yeah.
If you've got a boardroom full of me's, you get the
Right.
same answers on everything and the same ideas. But if you've got your neighborhood, you get all different ideas and different ways of approaching things, and it works
Yeah,
better that
well,
way.
that's exactly how our neighborhood meetings go
That's-
down.
as long as they bring food, I'm coming
Exactly.
over.
No, that's exactly what we do. Just bring
That's
bring
great.
food. Everyone bring
That's great.
something.
Okay, so you better take on that other question there.
It's
It's a big one.
well, there's a bunch of questions we
Yeah,
could
yeah.
ask. You know, so how do you? And I think what Pat was trying to get at is how do you encompass all of these topics in a way? And I think, you know, it's difficult to kind of fit all those pieces in under one platform, and you know, make sure that the kids are coming away with something meaningful. So how do you kind of touch every kid that comes through, every child that comes through the camp in a positive way, and make sure that you're getting, you know, that every child's having that experience?
Absolutely, that is a big question.
Yeah.
It's one that we spend a lot of our time in the off season and midsummer, I would say, really thinking about. I think a big piece of it is it really starts again with our staff team. So recruiting and bringing together a staff team that's coming from all kinds of different life experiences and backgrounds and identities, so that we come as close as we can to offering every child that steps into camp as a camper the opportunity to see themselves in a mentor. So recognizing that a child of color really needs to see a mentor of color
Right.
in a positive leadership role, and that connection is going to be really unique and special in a way that a white mentor will not be able to connect with that child. So recognizing that it's really important for us to recruit our staff, like I said, from all over the place and from all kinds of different experiences and backgrounds. And I think, so beyond Camp Hochelaga, we also have a couple of other programs that meet that mission statement and some of those big catchphrases that we were talking about, like environmental leadership and social justice advocacy. So we have our Leaders on the Lake program in the spring, which really hones in on environmental stewardship and leadership. We bring...
Now, who's in that? This is called Leaders on the Lake. What age group are you? Same age group?
Mostly middle school and teenage girls.
Okay.
So 10 to 17 is usually our age range for that program. It's a weekend at camp, a little bit shorter. Again, we struggle with that challenge of how do you pack enough into a weekend in an impactful way so that those youth walk away with something.
Do you step back? And I was telling you, I was a host for a church group. We go up on a long weekend, Friday we come back Monday night, so it was like a 4-day week. And when I would go up with my church group, they would assign me to another church as their leader. And by Saturday afternoon, we'd all get together, the leaders, and decide and talk about which kid is struggling, and just sort of put the word out and make sure we have a plan without them knowing what we're doing to give them some additional strength or some additional words of comfort or whatever. Do you do that? So if you have kids that are really struggling.
So we have camp broken down into 3, during our summer programs, we have it broken down into 3 different age areas. So almost 3 different smaller communities within the larger community. And each of those smaller communities has its own leader. We call them a head of line. And so the heads of line come together with their staff teams at the start and the end of every session, and usually a number of times in between. I think they meet almost daily to talk through the needs that they've seen arise in the day, and the successes. Really, we really encourage them to explore the parts of their day that went really, really well, and the parts that were a challenge, so that everybody can celebrate success and learn through challenge.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have you partnered with any other, you're talking about environmental stewardship, you're right on the lake.
Yeah.
Have you talked or have any sort of relationship with other organizations that are promoting lake health or anything like that? Things like specifically LCI or the Lake Champlain Basin program, any of those?
Yeah, so we work with Lake Champlain Basin program quite often. Actually, our assistant director just went and had a really great partner meeting with them this morning.
Oh, nice.
So they've been part of our Leaders on the Lake program on the ground. They've come in with watershed resources and informational resources. We have a whole environmental stewardship set of kits and activities for our day campers that live on site with us that were supplied by Lake Champlain Basin program. So they've been an amazing resource and have really helped us round out our understanding of the current state of the lake and the things that we can make sure that we're doing at camp to keep our footprint small.
Which side of the island are you on?
So we look back over the Green Mountains. We look back.
So you have a front row seat.
We do.
for all of the lake woes.
Yes.
Yeah, Lake
absolutely.
Champlain's going to be talked about a lot this year in the
Oh
legislature.
yeah, it's gonna be a big
I
topic.
mean, if they don't, we're already 10 years, if not more, behind the.
Yeah, well, we finally got 2 years of full funding,
Yep.
and we'll see if we can keep that up.
Yep.
Be
Yeah.
a challenge.
They have to have a
absolutely.
plan to do something.
Yes, yeah.
Just a minor problem.
More to come on that.
So,
Some of the events that we've talked about, we talked a lot about the camp, but also some of the other stuff you do is the annual Stand Against Racism, the Holistic Women's Retreat Weekend, promoting young leader and STEM topics, social justice, Leaders on the Rise. All of this stuff is super relevant. All this stuff you've been doing for quite a while.
Yeah.
And what are kind of like each of these programs are obviously something slightly different that you're targeting. And what are some of the big ones aside from the camp?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about Stand Against Racism, and there's another national YWCA USA campaign Week Without Violence in October that really centers on raising awareness for issues of domestic and sexual violence and assault, particularly gender-based violence.
When you say standing against racism, what does that entail? What are you asking the kids to speak up, the kids to recognize and see something, say something? What's the message of what you want them to do?
So Stand Against Racism is actually a program that we have yet to fully connect with camp. So we don't necessarily bring Stand Against Racism as its spring program. It typically happens in April at the national level through YWCA USA. We participate as a chapter of YWCA USA, but it's not specifically a part of our camp programming yet. In the past couple of years, we've partnered with SEBA to bring artists of color and works of art that approach and deal with and talk through issues of race, particularly in our community, into the public eye. So we had an open art space where artists could present their work and folks could come through and see it. So that was this past spring. We've also addressed, we've been at the State House and we've addressed everybody on the floor.
You've been up there, right?
We have, so YWCA USA has created a pledge that really truthfully, I believe, at the core of the meaning of the pledge to stand against racism is a call to the white community to take a stand and stand up and say something when you see something wrong. So that message we bring to our kids, that message of saying something when you see something wrong.
Well, it's an important message because you don't solve a problem like systemic racism by people of color standing up and defending themselves, right? That's a piece of it, but you also need people who are not of color or of different colors to stand up and say something when they see something also, and that's a really key piece of it. And quite honestly, one of the reasons why we're probably still dealing with it today is that I think a lot of people are like, well, it's not me, it's not my problem, and that's what needs to change. And I think we've made a lot of progress over the last 100 years in getting rid of institutional racism in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of implicit racism that's still, I think, just under the surface. It's not, as in your face maybe as it was, but it's still there, and people can't really grasp a hold of it maybe, but you still know it's there.
And particularly in since I've been in Vermont anyway, I've noted that there are some really powerful organizers and organizations that have people of color at their leadership and at the helm that are making big moves. So we've really been taking the last couple of years to step back for a moment and make sure that the way that we're engaging is really what is being asked of predominantly white organizations. Because we acknowledge that our leadership is white, and therefore we need to step back for a moment and make sure that we're asking the people who belong to the communities that we would like to advocate for what it is that they need and how we can help, right? Where do we belong in the conversation?
How can we help you?
Exactly.
I think a lot of it is education of the white person, because I think there's things that we have learned and said and done our whole lives, right? And nobody's ever said back to us, hey, that's wrong.
Don't do that.
And you get called names or something. I had something happen on Facebook not too long ago. I just put something out there and I got whacked by, how can you do that? I'm like, what are you talking about? And one of them took the time to explain the whole thing to me. And I went, oh, I got it. Thank you. I won't do that ever again. But it wasn't intentional. It was just, it was just years and years of not thinking it. And she took the time to explain it to me, and I wrote her a private note and told her, thank you, that I get it, because you didn't yell and put a sign in my face and say, you're because then you sort of shut down and get really angry and you don't pay attention. Exactly. But anyway, it was a learning experience for me, and I was glad to learn it. So.
Right.
But I think people get mad, like you're supposed to know this stuff, but you don't unless you're educated and told.
And we have a huge responsibility to educate one another so that we're not always looking to that person of color in the room to take on the educational role, because I mean, I certainly can't speak from experience, but that has got to be exhausting.
Yeah, I would
I
imagine.
bet to have that on your shoulders all the
Yeah,
time.
that's
Yeah.
huge.
So can you tell me about the Women's Weekend? I may be signing up. What's the Women's Weekend?
Yeah, so this will be our third annual Women's Weekend. It's a little bit of a newer program for us. It is this fall. It will take the form of a weekend in September. It's really focused on bringing women together in the space of camp to create community that then results in resilience when they head back out into the world. So bringing women together from all kinds of different backgrounds, and we're really working to make sure that our Women's Weekend program is accessible and that it can reach into all corners of our community here in Vermont,
Great.
to give women the opportunity to come together and have fun at camp and play
yeah,
and jump
cool.
on the water trampoline
Right.
and hang out, but also
All right,
Sounds like a good
now
time
we're
to me.
talking.
right? But also we partnered with Bay State Financial last year to bring female financial education advocates onto
Oh,
camp to
perfect.
meet with women one-on-one and talk about
That's cool.
their
They're fine,
finances and their
perfect.
understanding of financial literacy, which can be, I know in my own personal experience, it can be really intimidating as a female to walk into a male-dominated space like that and admit how much I feel like I don't know,
Yeah.
right? And then
Right
and
with
then
you.
have somebody on my level talking
Yeah.
to me about how I can learn more.
Right.
So things like that, we bring components like that into Women's Weekend. We offer a really safe and comfortable space for women to explore.
I really
makes them
like that
strong.
there's I shall not get into specific, but there's a women's event that happens in Vermont, and their agenda, it's about saunas, and I mean, it's like, it's not what you're doing. And I think women need what you're doing rather than all the, I don't know, touchy-feely sort of stuff. It's like, please, people, do the finances, do something that women could
Yeah.
actually use in
Talk
the
about
marketplace.
insurance or
Yeah,
talk
exactly.
like all these things that no one really knows about, but no one wants to admit that they don't know
it's this
about.
list of they have jewelry, all this stuff that's like, no, it's supposed to be an educational weekend.
Yeah.
I don't need to know about jewelry. I've got that down.
And we try to
passed
mix
that
in
course.
a really good balance of, that opportunity to meet with a financial planner and grow your financial literacy, and then go participate in, some kind of high action movement in a group of,
Good for
a
you.
group that is all female and feels really comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
So movement and play and creative expression balanced in there with
Oh, what fun.
education and social
Nice
justice.
way to learn, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is all of your programming on site at the camp, or do you have off-site programming as well? You talked about the SIBA exhibit.
Yeah, so every now and then in the past couple of years, we've had some community events that were not based at camp, but we primarily use our camp property because it is such a resource for us. The biggest challenge it presents is that because it's located out in the Champlain Islands and is a seasonal facility, we're limited by the seasons and
Right.
the year and
Yeah.
the distance, so that does create a little bit of an access challenge, especially for women and families and youth who have challenges around transportation and
Right.
You do ice skating in the winter. You open it up for ice skating.
we've been talking about winter camp.
Yeah.
We're thinking about it.
That could be an interesting
Definitely.
experience. Yeah, it'd
Yeah.
probably
I
have
think
to be
you're
a
gonna have
day
to put the
camp.
electricity back in or something.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We might need a lot of
That
space
heat
heaters.
thing.
Yeah.
Big campfires. I'm not
You
sure.
have some great keynote speakers show up too. I know.
Mm-hmm.
I read where Ricky Gar-Diamond was there.
Yeah.
I know. I wrote an article for her for the Woman's magazine that she's involved in. But she's got a book called Screwnomics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read that, and I bet she's a dynamic speaker.
Yeah,
She's
absolutely.
amazing.
So
I
we had
really
her
like
this past summer for Women's
Yeah.
Weekend, and then the summer prior we had Debbie Irving
Oh.
as our keynote.
Right.
She wrote "Waking Up White."
Yes, right.
Yeah, so that first year, the keynote speaker was really focused on thinking about, ourselves as white people in the conversation of race, and what that really means. And then this past year with Ricky Gard-Diamond, she came in and further explored that whole piece of financial literacy.
Because she's
for
very
women.
much into the women's movement
Mhm.
and supporting women, getting right up the ladder.
Yeah,
She's cool.
absolutely.
That's great. I also know Patty Houston. Can I put in a bit? Patty's on the board.
Yep,
I work
Patty's
with Patty in
wonderful.
the Department of Labor and know her well.
Her daughter was one of our camp staff this
Oh,
past
was
summer
she?
as
Oh,
well.
that's
yes.
right.
She's-
That's great.
She's amazing.
Yeah, Patty's really sharp.
That's very cool.
So
One of the things we found out about that I think is kind of cool is you have a bunch of your staff members that are going to be participating in the Women's March in Montpelier. And was that kind of How did that happen? Was that just kind of like people talking around the water cooler? It's like, hey, let's do this, or is that kind of more of a structured thing?
Yeah, so a piece of what we've been doing, especially in the past couple of years, is making sure that we're branching out beyond our own organization to be engaged with what's going on at the larger level, statewide and nationally, so that we, as YWCA Vermont's chapter of YWCA USA, are engaged in that more national and even statewide conversation. So the Women's March engagement came out of myself and our assistant director noting that it was happening, and it was something that we personally wanted to participate in, and something that we as YWCA Vermont could bring to our 1,200 families that we have direct contact with, and then also our couple hundred staff that have been engaged in the last couple of years. And a role that we can take in that whole conversation is to send out that opportunity and that resource, and then offer our own presence as a grounding starting point, right? So if you know that you're going to meet up with your camp leader or your camp director and your program director under a tree by the Women's March, you might be a lot more inclined to come.
Do you survey the girls and at their age, I should call them women, about what they learned, what we could do better, what we did right, and get feedback from them about, like, say, the march? What message would they like to bring forward to other women?
Yeah, so we work quite a bit with our campers and staff to collect feedback. Our campers complete what we call a Hochelaga high five at the end of every session. It's based on the 5 fingers on your hand, right? 4 fingers and a thumb, and they're identifying something that they did that was new, a new skill that they learned. So we look at social, emotional, and physical learning, and all these different sort of components that go into a really substantive and impactful experience as a young person. So did you try something new that was outside of your comfort zone? If so, what did you try? And how did it make you feel? Can you think of an example of a time you helped someone, and how did you help them, and why? What motivated you to be helpful? We ask kids to think about who they have brought into their circle as a new friend, and people who they've reconnected with if they're returning to camp. And some kids will list like 50 names, right? They just go, and the whole thing is just names of new friends, which is cool. There's clearly community in that. And we ask kids to think about something that they did that was really hard for themselves to do, and how that made them feel once they were done doing it, right? So something that inspired fear or caused them to step outside of their comfort zone. How did they feel after, and who helped them to feel good
brings
at
to
the
my
end?
mind a kid talking to a group. Do you make them stand up and talk to a group? Because that's always, not anymore. All I need is a microphone and I'm fine. But years ago, that was my worst fear.
A lot of people have that fear.
Yeah. It's just,
Yeah, well, it's all challenged by choice. So we don't
Oh, I see.
insist that anybody do anything
Okay.
other than stay safe and be respectful and be kind. But there are definitely kids who stand up. We have this traditional closing candlelight ceremony at the end of every session, and it's a tradition that we've carried since the very beginning in 1919. So we come together with candles, and we sit around a campfire and really take some time to think about what the time together has meant, and what we're taking back into our community and into our circles from camp. And we have kids that stand up, and you would not have known it by the expression on their face all week, but they stand up and just share from a deep place within themselves what camp has meant to them, and how it has made them feel empowered to stand up and share their voice when they might not have been
pretty
otherwise.
smart people back in 1919 that
They were.
developed all of this. Right?
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't sound like it's surprising to me that it's changed much. I mean, I know you've had to make adjustments for maybe LGBTQ and some of the other transgender, but that's just part of, you've got a base that's so strong here, you just sort of adjust.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really nice.
It's very cool. So what kind of, actually, before we move on, should put a plug in for the Women's March, which is on Saturday, January 19th,
Yep,
right?
absolutely, from 10 to noon.
10 to noon.
And it's actually taken the form of a rally this year across the nation, so people are gathering to rally in
Wasn't that the
front
one
of the State
last
House.
year that even I-89 was blocked?
Yeah, they were like, the traffic
I
was
was
backed up.
fortunately ahead of all of that, and then I got home and I heard I heard about it. It was amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
think
It
it
was.
would be a big
Just make the
turnout.
signs
Yeah.
big
Sure it will
enough
be.
so we could read them. I hate when they, they
Tiny little
I can't read what they're trying to say.
You're like,
Make it.
you're like pulling out your
It's
magnifying
hard. There's
glass
so
on
much to
TV.
say, right? You have to
Yeah.
write small to get it all on there.
Yeah.
One year there was a guy outside the State House carrying a sign, and the press couldn't see what he was saying, so they sent me out to ask him, and everybody knew this guy. I said, "You've really got to make it larger so people can. You're missing your message."
Right.
You know?
No one knows what you're trying to
Exactly.
say.
Exactly.
We encourage everybody to attend, though, on Saturday.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
That'll be very
hopefully
cool.
I
we'll
That's
heard it was
coming right up.
really big
meaningful
crowd.
last year. A lot
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
of people just by being there felt empowered.
Right, right, and you hope that that empowerment then creates a ripple effect as they head back into their own community at home
Right.
and
Absolutely.
take action in some way
Good.
to
So
continue the conversation.
Kind of in that same vein, you kind of mentioned that you're becoming more active in the community outside of your camp activities and scheduled programs and all that stuff. What kind of community or advocacy have you done? Like what what kinds of other things aside from the Women's March have you been involved with here in Vermont or anywhere else?
Yeah, so we're really working to grow in our legislative advocacy. We're finding that that is a really in conversation with other nonprofits and other organizations here that are advocating for racial and social change in Vermont and nationally and globally. That by taking a stand and spreading legislation that lines up with our mission and our values into the community to raise awareness, we've been able to reach out further than we sometimes do if we just schedule a community event, so to speak.
Right.
So we participated in bringing our camp families and our camp community on board with the, I'm going to forget the exact name of the legislation, but it was the bill that we were signing for not so long ago that had to do with broadening the scope of education to really include ethnic and racial diversity.
Oh, yes, I just read that there's a bill
Yep,
that wants
absolutely.
to
There's a
broaden.
new bill this year.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember who, was
And-
it Coach that representative?
Oh gosh, I don't know, but I know it's one of the ones that the
Yeah.
speaker is
Yes, she
promoting.
is.
Yeah. So recognizing that while Stand Against Racism, YWCA USA's National Racial Injustice Awareness Week is important, that advocating for racial justice is
Right.
really something we need to
Right.
do all year round and every day and all the time, that having that as a 1 week campaign, while it is powerful to raise awareness for a week, there's an opportunity to be engaged in the conversation all year
Right.
round with our campers and our families and our staff.
Right.
And our larger community. We work with quite closely with Ben and Jerry's, Global Foundries, a little bit with Dealer.com and Food Science to bring big groups of volunteers into camp to help us open up and close the facilities. So there's another community of people there that we
That's
have
cool.
Great.
a voice with, where we could be advocating
Nice.
for social change.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool. So are you planning any special events to celebrate your 100th
Uh-oh,
anniversary?
here
Is
it
there any
comes.
big parties planned or?
Just a slightly prompted question.
Yes.
We're really excited. So 2019, we've just officially launched our 100th year of Camp Hochelaga, which we're thrilled about, and we are planning an all-day celebration on June 15th. It's a Saturday.
Okay.
We're going to kick it off from 10 to 2 with a community open house, so it's open to absolutely anyone who would like to join us. We'll do a big, huge barbecue-style lunch. We're anticipating somewhere around 500 or 600 people at least.
Great.
Wow.
So it should be a really powerful place to bring together our volunteers and our families, new and old, alumni, and just interested community members to engage in the story of Hochelaga
It
over the
just
last
sounded-
100
Bruce
years.
thinks his sisters went there, so we are going to let them know.
Wonderful.
Have
Yes,
them come up
please.
here. That'd be
Yeah.
cool.
No need to register or anything. It'll just be open doors from 10 to 2.
Oh, that's fun.
And then after that, from 2 to 4, we have a special alumni afternoon,
Ah,
which alum that you might know might be interested in. So it'll include reflective walks through history on camp to hear. We're hoping for some really beautiful recorded stories of folks' time
Things they
at
memories they took
Hochelaga.
with them. And
Exactly.
Great.
All of our old, they're called logs, but they're yearbooks more or less. All of our
Yeah.
old yearbook books stemming back to the 1920s and 30s will be there on display. So a really intentional time for our alumni community to connect back with
I'm
camp.
sure it's very unusual. We did the Wayside was 100, celebrate their 100th year, the restaurant here in town, I was reading, it's very unusual for most any entity to last 100 years. So you're certainly doing something right,
Yeah.
I would think.
It's another big anniversary this year also.
Wow.
Norwich is 200 years old.
Oh, stop.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah. Yep.
That's
We
great.
can't quite hold a candle to that yet. But
No, you'll get
100
there,
years
you'll
from
get
now.
there.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Here's to the
So
next 100
we
years.
should have asked about, because you're talking about legislature, do you get state funding? Where does most of your funding come from?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so our funding all comes from our camp tuition.
Oh.
So we run camp for 8 weeks of the summer, and it's a tuition-based program, so our families, for the most part, are paying a tuition base to send a child to camp. We do have a really robust scholarship program,
Right.
which in my own professional and personal history, working with children from at-risk backgrounds who might not be able to be a part of the
Right.
camp story if they did not have some financial assistance. It's been really at the forefront of my focus. So our scholarship program is known as the Circle of Girls Fund, and we bring, this past year, we brought 72 girls from around Vermont at little to no charge. We're hoping to, where our set goal for 2019 is 100 girls for the 100th year, or 100 campers. We're really working to move away from gender binary language, so 100 campers for the 100th year.
Great.
We're excited about it. We're reaching out to our alum and donor communities to make that possible.
Nice.
So in addition to our camp tuition, we do function on local organization grants and then also private donations.
Very cool. So,
I'm very impressed.
what kind of other local organizations are involved in supporting the camp? We mentioned the Basin Program,
Yeah. Dealer.com,
Dealer.com, Ben & Jerry's, and
Global Foundries
Global
plays a
Foundries.
huge role. They bring like 3 crews every season to come and volunteer. It's amazing.
Wow.
I mean, they
Yeah.
do work that we just
Oh,
would
just to
not
patch it
get
up,
done.
to do...
Right, to
oh,
paint every
wow.
building on camp,
Oh,
right?
my
And they show up
word.
and they
Thank
do
you,
that on
Global
volunteer
Foundries.
volunteer
Very
base. So that means that we can then put that donation from a generous private donor right into our scholarship program
That's great.
instead of putting it into new
That's
paint.
great. Very nice.
So yeah, it's a beautiful relationship. Beyond that, we've just really rounded out a partnership with the Migrant Education Program through UVM Extension.
Yep.
So again, that scholarship program, really looking for ways to make sure that those funds that are available are
Right.
reaching as far as they can reach into the community. So working with Migrant Education to connect migrant working families and
Oh,
their kids
lovely.
with camp experiences. So it's a community of kids that often don't have a whole lot of enriching opportunities in the summer when they might be spending some long hours unsupervised. Giving them a chance to come out and be part of camp for a week or
I think
two.
the Sailing Center is doing something similar to that,
Mhm.
and trying to get some of those kids that, you
Get
know,
experiences,
get
right?
experience, exactly, experiences just doing something, building a community or whatever.
Right. Yeah,
A
absolutely.
while ago, you
Very
mentioned
cool.
the word chef. Food is my life.
Oh, no.
How does any chef deal with, you said, well, by the end of the season, you got 600, 800
Yeah,
women, girls, right? How,
it is
and I'm sure
wild.
that has to be healthy, so that's
Absolutely.
a trick.
It's a tough
Keep
job.
everyone happy.
Yeah, keep everybody
I-
happy, you know, where's
hey.
the pizza?
Right.
Um,
I credit them all day
I
long. Our
bet.
2 chefs, they do phenomenal
And
work.
have they stayed with you all these years?
No, they're actually new to us
Oh,
this
are they?
past summer, so this will be their second summer with
Uh-huh.
us, which has been great. It's really nice to have the same team come back in for more
Right.
than a summer,
Yeah.
because they really get to build some community with our staff and our kids. We
For
have
sure.
about 50% retention for staff and campers.
Oh, that's
So
good, that's a good.
coming back
return.
for another year. We might be closer to 60 for campers.
That's
A good group of returning campers,
Be
definitely.
interesting if the volunteers, the kids got any kind of credit, college credit for working with kids in this setting.
Yeah, so we do have a counselor and training program. It's a 5-week leadership program for teens,
Great.
typically 15 and up. They come in and join us with their eye on maybe becoming a camp counselor, but also to grow leadership skills across the board. So they work on resume building and working with youth in a number of
Great.
different settings. And they do some volunteer hours. So another one of our partners, we worked closely with Healthy Roots Collaborative and NOFA Vermont to get
NOFA.
teens out to do some
Yeah.
gleaning at Pamikala
It's my
Farm.
favorite
So
thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever done gleaning?
No.
It's amazing. You see all this pile of stuff I would have thrown away.
Right.
And by the end, you cut out all the bad stuff and push it down this end. And by the end of the day, there's this other pile of really good, great food that would have been thrown away if it was in my house. And I learned a lot.
Wow.
And
So
most
I-
of that gleaned food ends up on a food shelf
Food
or
shelf,
at a
right.
food pantry. So, turning a whole bunch of would have been thrown away cucumbers into
Exactly.
pickles that are then on a
I
food shelf.
left
was
there
a-
very humbled
Yeah.
and embarrassed by my past performance, but
Our
you won't believe the
CITs,
stuff you can get out of food you think is
Yeah.
useless or whatever.
they
but
came back and
wrong.
told us they had recovered something like 1,000 pounds of basil, right?
Basil,
They've
wow.
just been like picking and recovering basil all day
Wow.
that would have otherwise been thrown away.
It's
That's
amazing.
crazy.
But we've got
So-
2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we've covered everything you would like to cover, and tell people where they can find you on the web and anything else that you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So our enrollment is open now for summer 2019 for our spring program, Leaders on the Lake, and our fall program, Leaders on the Rise. And you can find all kinds of information about that and our 100th year at ywcavt.org.
It's a great
Very
website.
cool.
We're going to steal some of those pictures to put on the end of the show.
Oh,
yeah,
please,
we've got to
yeah.
put a couple of the pictures up.
I
Yeah,
can
sure.
send you more if you
Yeah.
like any
Yeah.
others.
Absolutely.
We have a
great.
wealth of them.
So
Absolutely.
thank you very much, Hannah.
Yeah,
It's a
thank you.
pleasure
Thank you for
meeting
having
Thank
me.
you, Ben,
Thanks so
for
much.
joining
Thanks
us.
for having me.
We'll see you next week. Very interesting show next week, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites. Bye.